Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Kyle Lacy to the podcast. I think he's a pretty well-known figure out there. So probably many of you have seen him or followed him for years, and you get to hear directly from him today on what he's been up to. So he spent the last 17 years or so building, scaling, failing, winning all across the high growth software. Haven't we all? Isn't that a fun place to be?
Yes, we have.
He's currently leading the marketing team at Jellyfish. And he's also led teams across Seismic, OpenView, Salesforce, ExactTarget, a number of our favorite B2B tech companies out there. So we're excited to have him. We're excited to learn more from him on his path to CMO and how he got there. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
Good. Well, we are glad to have you here. I think you've got a lot to offer. Our listeners tend to be up and coming CMOs, people who want to be CMOs in the future, or they're brand new CMOs, or they're existing CMOs who are looking for ways to be kind of a modernized, learning, next generation thinking CMO. So we get a little bit of both. So with that context in mind, tell us a little bit about you and your path to CMO, how you got here, what your career journey looked like that drove you to this spot.
Yeah, I mean, I you mentioned in the intro failure. I started an agency after graduating college, and that was the failure part. I mean, I failed plenty of times after that fact, but that's a completely different conversation and story. But because I had the agency, I was lucky enough to be hired by a customer of ours, which was ExactTarget, which at the time, huge email service provider, which is now the marketing cloud at Salesforce. We went through an acquisition with Salesforce and an IPO. I didn't have anything to do with any of that. They hired me to do thought leadership, and I spoke at conferences, and I started the content marketing team at ExactTarget. So I was very lucky to have that experience in Indianapolis, where I live today, because ExactTarget built just a great company in the area. And I got to experience Salesforce and OpenView, a venture capital firm in Boston that I joined, and my wife and I moved to Boston, and we spent 2 years at OpenView before joining a portfolio company of OpenView called Lessonly. And that was where I cut my teeth at being a VP of marketing, and then a CMO and scaling Lessonly, and then the acquisition by Seismic, which then led to being a marketing leader at Seismic, which was a very different world where, it 10x my marketing budget and 10x the people I was managing and 10x the territory that I was managing from Australia all the way to Germany. I burned out pretty quickly in that environment after spending 4 years trying to build company like Lessonly. And then I joined Jellyfish in October 2022 after taking a break for my sanity. So I didn't run in front of a car because I was just burned out, right? But so Jellyfish, I joined in October 2022 as CMO. So that's the condensed version of the failing and winning and all the stuff in between.
So that's the sort of LinkedIn version. What are the motivators that drove the pivots other than burnout? I heard that one. That's one first year. But what's the thing that motivates you in each role to kind of take a pivot, take a move? Is it the learnings? Is it the people? Is it the metrics? Is it the career ambition? Is it building? What do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. The pivots were more around career ambition and learning. ExactTarget, being an entrepreneur and running an agency of 5 people, jumping into a 2,000 person software company was very different for me. And I had to learn pretty hard lessons on how much personal brand affects company brands, especially in the world of social, which is part of the reason I was hired initially at ExactTarget. OpenView was a pivot because I didn't believe I could make it in a tier 1 city like Boston. For me, it was making sure that I could keep up with people who were, who I believed were better at the job than me. So moving to Boston, working for a venture capital firm, kind of instilled that in me. And then Lessonly was, I wanted to be a marketing leader. I had seen, working for a venture capital firm is a weird thing because you kind of get an MBA in software, kind of, but you don't really get to influence much. You're just kind of there learning. So I wanted to influence it. So Lessonly was the career pivot to be a marketing leader and to scale a company. Seismic was opportunistic for me. Like, it was, they bought Lessonly, they offered me the SVP of marketing role. There was no way in hell I was going to turn that down. It was a team of 90, huge budget. I loved the CEO. And then because of burnout, I took a break, and Jellyfish is just another learning for me. It's a different persona. We sell to engineering leaders, very different than MarTech, which I grew up in. And we've raised a lot of money. And so it's a very different type of mentality than small fundraising, which Lessonly had, and our outcome was amazing, but that's just a different world. So short answer is pivots were definitely career progression for sure for me.
I love the comment. I mean, that's interesting. The thing you said about, I didn't think I could make it in Boston. What was that? What was that? That I'm not trying to like lay you on like the couch do therapy. I'm just curious about like
we all need it. We all need therapy.
Well, we can use the next 30 minutes or so, however.
Oh, great. Let's see. We can trade off.
What drove that, and what today, if you went back, would you have that same kind of, I don't want to call it insecurity, like that same concern about not being able to make it?
I don't think it's unfair to call it insecurity. Mm-hmm. I think there's a difference between self-doubt and insecurity. I think I deal more with self-doubt now than insecurity. Mm-hmm. Early on in my career, where I had experienced a place like Boston, where you have MIT and Harvard, and I barely graduated college at a private school that nobody had heard of, like that, it was definitely insecurity. I still deal with, doubt on my ability to do something, but it's not debilitating for me. It's more of it's turned from being debilitating to being fuel. So that's why I separate between insecurity and self-doubt, because I can overcome self-doubt. It was hard for me to overcome insecurity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Interesting. And yeah,
I think it's the act of doing. I think it's the act of doing it, and winning and failing, and understanding that other people feel this way, and get, you and me having a conversation with other CMOs and CROs where everybody deals with this, that I think it's just a maturing of being a leader that happens.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like, if today in hindsight, would you look at that differently than when you were in the moment of that insecurity? That's really interesting. I did, not to like do a random shameless plug, but I did go to Harvard for my MBA. And my first day, maybe my full 2 years, I always was like, how did I get here? Like, I don't feel like I am worthy of sitting in this room. Like, I'm this little small town girl from Texas, and I got people who were the, personal assistant to President George W. Bush, or I had people who, went to Oxford for their undergrad and went to private school on the Upper East Side, this boarding school, or, all these kind of things. And I was like, I'm just like a public school girl from Texas. I'm 6 A&M University. Like, anyway, so it just always made me laugh that even getting into there, I was like, I don't know if I'm.
Yeah. But you proved to yourself that you could. And I think that's the most important part of it, right? Because you graduate, which is great, right? Like I had to go a fifth year to get a diploma. Yeah. So I remember I remember when we lived in Boston, I considered an MBA program, and I called and talked to somebody at MIT for the Sloan. Mm-hmm. And they talked to me for about 5 minutes, and they were like, I don't think this is true. So that just compounded the insecurity, because I'm like, MIT doesn't want me. So I'm kidding. But yeah, it was definitely insecurity early on.
Yeah. I chose a fifth year at Texas A&M, but it was only because I wanted another football season. So I stayed till December. Like 9 or 12 hours or something of like schlub classes just to get that fifth football season. So
I don't even think we were in the NCAA as a school. So if that tells you anything, we didn't go to sporting events.
We didn't go to sports. We didn't play sports ball.
We didn't play sports. No, we didn't.
Cool. Okay. So looking back over that, where we just talked about your path, like if we have people listening who are sort of early in their careers, what is it that you would give them? What kind of advice would you give them looking back to get them a seat at the table early in their career that should then drive them to where you are today or could?
I mean, there is the emotional and there's tactical. So the emotional is understand that there are ebb and flows to a role and you are going to be in the shit and you need to just work through it. It's going to happen. If you experience downtime where you are depressed and you hate the job and you don't understand, you just got to push through it. You can't quit. I see too many. I mean, you and I hire a lot of people. I see way too many 9-month, 1-year jobs, 6-month jobs. And some of that, I'm not going to judge people who do it, but some of it after conversations with people is that they got overwhelmed and they quit. And you're never going to be in a situation, especially in a scale up, where that's not going to be the case because it's just moves so quickly. So balance yourself appropriately. Make sure you're putting the necessary guardrails on for you to manage that type of emotion. For me, it's exercise. For me, it's my kids and my wife, right? My family. You know, on the tactical side, own a number, own an actual number, pipeline and bookings. You get a seat at the table as a marketing leader. If you are supporting a pipeline and bookings number, you actually understand headcount capacity for the sales leader. Now that's a sales like go-to-market motion. That's very tactical, but those are the two things. Got to push through when you're feeling down.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. It's actually a little bit about pipe and bookings. So pipe, obviously, yes, 100%. We think about bookings. Bookings requires a lot of sales and marketing alignment, requires a lot of working together. How do you manage conversation, communication, transparency on a bookings miss, especially if you have a pipeline hit? But if you, when there are organizations outside of your purview who actually carry the actual responsibility of driving that booking, but yet your performance metric is tied highly to that delivery. Like how do you both, I just had this conversation with my boss, that's why it's top of mind. Like how do you tactfully have this is what I think is broken without sounding like finger pointing? Have you ever done that dance?
Yeah. So the way we solve it at Jellyfish is that when we're reporting on things to the board, to the exec team, the sales leader and I are doing it together. So the storyline, you always have to work together on how you're telling the story in a meaningful way. That's number one. Number two is, from a marketing perspective, I judge the team on 2 scorecards. We have an inbound sourced scorecard and we have an all-bound scorecard. And they're 2 very different things. Thank you to Demandbase for supporting our all-bound strategy. Shout out. I've evolved as a marketing, when I joined Jellyfish, I had this mentality of we're not going to report on influence. You should influence 100% of pipeline and bookings, which is fine. It seems like it's just something I said that because I came from a high velocity sales motion where majority of the deals closed in quarter, I could say that because I always was a bookings number. So for me, it's been understanding the support model for sales and how do you make sure that you are speaking the same language as the sales leader, right? Like headcount capacity is a great example. You talk to some newer marketing leaders, they don't know what that means. They don't know how that affects whether you hit a bookings number enough. Or do you know the quota attainment goal that your sales leader is thinking about constantly? Right? Because that's where they're going to get chewed up in an exec or board meeting if they don't get within X amount of quota attainment for those reps. And most of the time, we just don't think about that as marketers, but it's primary to the success because, the mistakes that I've made, and this is more for people who want to be CMO, is when I bring an amazing brand campaign and celebrate the fact that it looks great, people loved it, and we missed the bookings number that quarter. Do not bring cool brand stuff to the table for a board if you missed your bookings number. They don't care. They don't care. hit your bookings number. Then you can figure out like cool swag and brand stuff and all that, right? But, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question, but you got to be tight at the hip. And if you're product led, that's you have product sales. And then if you're past a certain point in revenue, you're thinking about expansion, which CS and account management team needs to be involved, right? So there's a lot to unpack there, but.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I love that. And it's very funny. I'm about to launch a rebrand in a month. And I was at the board meeting last week and it was just pipeline. We just talked about pipeline. Like that was it.
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
Like, brand here. We're going to talk about pipe and why, we aren't hitting.
And you put the cool brand, which I know is going to be amazing, in the appendix in case somebody wants to see it.
So they know the work that's going on, but.
And you hope they ask for it, but they're more tuned into that small segment that missed.
Exactly.
But that's what they're there for. That's what a board's for, right?
Very cool. Okay, something that I've heard you mentioned before that you've talked about is the role that taste plays in marketing. And so I'd love to know this. Obviously, like I used to be in consumer. I was senior brand manager on Chips Ahoy and Nutter Butter and Kraft string cheese and some cottage cheese, which was not about taste because cottage cheese is disgusting. But
yes, it is. I 100% support that statement.
Yes. And by the way, just a word of advice, if you ever want to manage cottage cheese, don't do it while you're pregnant because it's disgusting. I did many a cottage cheese factory.
Well, look, Cal, I have a weird aversion to just weird words. Like sour cream, no go. Cottage cheese, no go. Avocado, not a fan.
Oh. See, avocado to me is one of like the three foods, like along with cheese and peanut butter. One of those three, if you add to anything in the world, it will make it taste better.
Sure, I agree with cheese and peanut butter. I consume cheese and peanut butter almost daily. Avocado, can do it. Don't like guacamole, not a fan.
It's the word. I
just don't like the word.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay. Well, that's fun. Well, so tell me a little bit about taste now that we digressed into that path. We go on lots of words we don't.
So let's talk about cottage cheese again. No, it's I do want, maybe this is for me interviewing you about your transition to B2B because that's fascinating. So taste, I stole that idea from somebody. I'd read it online and I agreed with it so deeply that I had to talk about it. But I don't think you win as a company. I don't think you win as a marketing team unless you have good taste, honestly. And good taste can mean a variety of different things. For me, it's probably more the direction that you would think, which is more how can I make a B2B brand feel more like a consumer brand, where it doesn't feel similar to everybody else. It doesn't feel like you're just buying a piece of software. It feels like you are involved in something that is bigger than you are, that you're excited about, even though you're managing metrics and productivity of an engineering team, which is what Jellyfish sells, where you're managing Jira. And it came from a book called Emotional Branding by, I think it's Gobe. I don't know his last, Mark Gobe, Gobe. I read it when I was in senior year of high school and into college, and it was all around product design, right? Like he had an entire chapter on the Coke bottle and, how taste and feel and design builds out brand affinity and how people, now this was written in the 90s, so it's fairly old. But I think it applies to B2B. Like if you can be a great demand gen marketer, but if you don't have great taste as well, or you don't hire somebody that does from a brand perspective, I don't think you ever make it to where you want to be. You can do campaigns, but if you don't have good taste, they just look like everybody else. Rory Sutherland is probably the guy who said it, but his book Alchemy is so good. And it's kind of he talks about it quite a bit, where irrational decisions around marketing campaigns are usually the right ones. The rational ones are what fail, which I think is fascinating, which is absolutely fascinating. But yeah, that's kind of what I mean about taste. But I'm sure I mean, I'd love to know what you think about it, because coming from consumer, it's a very different world in general.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's the consumer side is massively different, but I mean, we are constantly redesigning packaging. We're constantly redesigning ad campaigns. We're running new creative workshops. Everything went through focus groups. I mean, you do a lot of things to see like what sparks. Whereas, yeah, B2B is so functional, often in its design of like brand, headline, product does X, solves this problem, click through now. Like it's very sort of transactional. It doesn't, I mean, that's why marketing in B2B, the creative side of marketing B2B tends to be terrible as compared to the creative side. And not because it's not great designers, it's because it's meant to drive an action and it's being tracked on results. It's not, it's much less on brand building, and the way that they.
But there are campaigns. I mean, you have some. I definitely have some where the best campaigns and experiences that I've done in my career were not judged by a number. Even though I completely understand that 10 minutes ago I said you have to own a number. When you come to a meeting with creative people, and the first thing you talk about is the ROI. We're going to invest this, and we're going to get 10x pipeline and hopefully 3x bookings. And if we don't get that, it's going to fail miserably. You have completely destroyed your creatives. They're not going to be creative. They're going to try to say, well, this landing page needs X, and why aren't we doing this? And why, they just won't, they have to be irrational to be creative.
Yeah.
And when you talk about ROI, doesn't mean you shouldn't. It just depends on when you do. And I've just learned that the irrational ideas are the ones that worked best for me. There's a couple failures in there, but mostly wins.
Yeah. Well, that's good, because I just approved a Demandbase branded DeLorean Lego kit this morning. So maybe,
yes.
I mean, you just never know.
Yes.
We're with the irrational ideas.
Well, look, Legos I will go to all day long. Like we have a Lego set that we did a Jellyfish Lego set, and we're going to come out with another one next year. Right. And we had a Golden Llama campaign that we did at Lessonly where I spray painted 2,000 3-inch llamas that we sent out to customers, and it had nothing to do with the software. It was just like, hey, give this to somebody that's exhibiting your values and doing their best work at your company. And it's the best campaign that we did.
Wow. See? And it makes no sense on paper. I mean, really, like you're not putting...
No sense. But we measured it, and it drove pipeline and bookings. And I probably will die younger because I inhaled a bunch of spray paint. But outside of that, it like that type of stuff just doesn't happen if you're like demand gen. But you live and die by demand.
Yeah. Do you find out a certain percentage of your budget that you allocate towards creative ideas?
I try. At a high level, it's between 20 and 30% that would be allocated. So I try to divide out headcount costs with program costs. Like a designer might be 50% of their salary. Their headcount cost goes towards brand because they're spending more time on it. Demand gen might be 15%, depending on what the project is. But I try to allocate 20 to 30%. That's a brand spend.
Gotcha. I like it. Okay. So we'll go back to some good career stuff. So what do you think? What do you wish? Like if you knew something back then that you know now, what would that be? Like, what do you wish you had been? What were you motivated by before that you're not anymore? Things that you thought you needed to rush along that actually weren't as exciting once you got there, or any of that?
I still struggle with this, but if I were to go back, that would be the thing I would bring up to myself, to little Kyle, little VP of marketing Kyle. Don't be so reactive. Like when challenges pop up, or you have a deal that you just lost that the sales leader's on fire about, or somebody made a mistake, I am super reactive. Like, get it done, fix it, let's move forward. And you don't have to be that reactive. You should be more mindful. You should be more focused. You shouldn't let things stress you out like that, because it's just going to spread to your team, and then your team's going to feel it too. So that would be my piece of advice to people who are becoming CMOs and VPs of marketing, where You just can't be. The sales is super reactive enough for everyone.
Marketing.
We don't need to be, we don't, I say that, it's more of a joke, but they need to be reactive. That's, I've never met a sales leader that's not reactive, right? Yeah. So marketing should be a little bit more balanced in how we approach things because we're supporting the entire company. Yeah. Not just sales.
Yeah. The word I like to use is unflappable. Like how can we,
yes,
say sometimes they're good, some things are bad, but how do we kind of maintain that consistency along the way? I like that.
Yeah. Our product leader, Jellyfish Krishna, is that he is just calm all the time. And I just wish I had just a little bit of Krishna, just a little bit to balance me a little bit.
There's something to calm that can send a signal of lack of urgency or a lack of drive to fix. But I don't know if it's more of that's a perception or if it's like the duck in the water where you're kind of smooth sailing across, but your legs are going crazy underneath. Things are happening.
Yeah, well, Krishna, definitely duck in the water. I've definitely been in situations where a calm, laid back demeanor is kind of like, what the hell are you doing? But Krishna, that's not Krishna. But it's also being reactive in a moment, right? Where somebody questions you made a mistake on a slide or the number's wrong, and you emotionally react to somebody attacking it. I wish I did that less. I wish I was a little bit more unflappable, which is a great word, which I might steal if that's okay with you. I'll give you credit.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it is one of those because when you don't want to freak your team out. I had a moment about a week ago where I had this situation that happened in marketing kind of blindsided me. And I was so caught off guard by it that I reacted. And I was like, how do I react to this I need this person to really know that they screwed up, but I also need to not be, I don't know, vindictive or mean. I need to be direct. This is not okay. This is what we're going to do about it. This is how we fix it in the future. We'll do a proper postmortem when this is over. But today, this is what I need. And it's hard to and sometimes you just kind of have to grit your teeth. My friend always,
well, how did you handle that situation? Did you grit your teeth and just go with it?
Well, my team was very, very, very clear that I was frustrated, but they were also very much on board with you handled that professionally. That was good. But the guy who I was talking to, who I didn't call by name, knew very clearly that I was talking to him. And you know what? It ended up driving this massive pivot and accelerated focus for the week. We got it done. It worked.
Right.
On those, we had to be okay, well, there's some good learnings that came out of this. And these are what we did wrong to get to this.
But the flip side, I think, is worse when you try to be too nice about something. I mean, you back off. Because as long as you do it, you said trying not to do it sound vindictive. I think that's the most important part. You can be, the responsibility is on you. It's on me. I am responsible for the growth of this company with the exec team and with the team that I built, right? So I have to usually take a break and write. I will write something out before I go back.
Yeah.
And I've learned pretty quickly through board meetings how to respond and ask questions in a meaningful way and then go bring an answer back if I don't know it or I feel like I completely screwed up or something or my team did. But for me, I have to write it out or I can't react in the moment.
Yeah.
Just to.
Yeah.
So I need to learn more of that, whatever you did.
Well, I do. I like the writing idea. I hadn't done that. I did I'm going to need an hour. I need to reflect on what just happened. I'll come back to you this afternoon. We'll put a plan, but give me an hour to let me take a quick walk, work through this, and I'll be back. And so that was about 3 hours later when we had the actual, this is what's going to happen conversation. But yeah, it's a tough one. I think it's a hard one. It's a balance between drive and urgency and calm and control. And it's a dance for sure.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to manage that, especially because of how much of for me, it's how much of my self-worth I put into the job and how much I love the job and how much I want to win. And you've got to be able to balance that appropriately. And I think that comes with just time and experience. And I was not like that at Leslie. I had to learn that, right? I had to learn that pretty quickly. And we had and even an exact target, like I put myself before people and the teams, and I learned pretty quickly you can't do that. And but it comes with time, it comes with experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And some people don't ever learn it.
No,
and
yeah.
I'll met those people.
Yes, we worked with them. Hopefully won't anymore.
Yes.
Like we've done
Right.
that.
Right.
Slight change. I'm just curious. It just made me think as you said that. Have you ever asked for a job? Like asked for a job title, asked for a promotion, asked for, let's say when something got bought by Seismic, did you ask to be the marketing leader that took over? Like how have you done that in your career?
I asked for the CMO role at Leslie after I was the VP of marketing for 2 years. I did not. That's the only role. That's the only one I've asked for.
How did it work?
Yeah. I mean, I actually, for a group of people that we were all first-time execs, like all of us, our founders, Max and Connor, first-time founders. We didn't know. We were pretty good at what we did. We didn't have any clue what we were doing, honestly, but we were decent at it. So to Max's credit, he said, I hear you. I want you to write out what you think you need to accomplish and what you have accomplished in order to feel like you have earned that.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to me because I walked in that room thinking I had already earned it. And so it was a good conversation to have where he pointed us some things out that he felt like I could work on. But the majority of the stuff I had accomplished. And after it happened and we went through the acquisition, him and I were talking about it, he was going to give it to me. He just wanted me to think through the process of why I should be a CMO.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of maturity to actually ask that of somebody. And yeah, I mean, there's things about negotiating that I've asked for, but from a title perspective, CMO, there's that Leslie.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
And you got to ask. What I tell people is that you have to ask for it.
Yeah.
Don't wait for it to be given to you if you're a VP or if you're an SVP. And if you do your job well and you understand how to communicate and you have high EQ and you understand how to get it done, then, it will come to you, but you got to ask for it.
Yeah. And that's
but I'm in a very lucky position as well, to be clear. So, take that with a grain of salt. But for me, it's been both a success as well as asking for it.
Yeah. Yeah. The asking for it, I always encourage folks to ask. And one way that I do it is I have, now obviously opportunistic is opportunistic. There's an opening in this thing, ask for it, raise your hand, tell me if this is something you're interested in. But then there's also, I do on my team's career, like my team's anniversaries, their work anniversaries. So once a year, outside of sort of normal weeklies and normal mid-year and annual performance reviews, I do these annual career conversations where I kind of sit with them and say, hey, today's your 2-year anniversary here.
That's a good idea.
There's no performance rating waiting at the end of this conversation. There's no strength and weakness conversation that you hear that, this is just an open dialogue around what do you want to be when you grow up? What experiences are going to open that up? What would you like to do next? And a lot of times it's kind of oh, interesting. I don't have any opportunities for that, but that's great that you're interested. And then it's almost, I feel like within a week, it's something pops up and I'm oh, I know he wants something like this. He told me that I can put it.
That's a good idea.
It's pretty interesting way.
That's a great idea to position it around their anniversary instead of it being a performance session.
I think people hit a milestone that's okay, I've been here 2 years. They do a kind of stop and reflect, look back, where do I want to be the next 2 years? What have I accomplished? What comes next? Am I content? Am I cool? And so it's a good time on that sort of annual cadence to have an open-ended dialogue with, like I said, there's no stress of the waiting for did I get a 3 or whatever metrics and things. It's just a conversation.
So I have 2 things I'm stealing from you now: Unflappable and the annual career conversation. That's good. Awesome. That's a great idea.
I'm going to steal taste, and I'm going to steal allocating budget for creative stuff. So that we'll go with that one. Cool. Awesome. Well, I'll let us wrap up a little bit here. So before we finish, one fun fact about you people don't know. Anything you can good?
It's more around, I don't know if it's a fun fact. I have a few obsessions. I'm obsessed with the Civil War and I'm obsessed with Orange Theory.
Orange Theory of Civil War.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's cool facts or something interesting, but those are the two things that have been pretty consistent for me for a while. and I'm not that consistent.
Like circuit training, HIIT training, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
it's an hour. You do rowing, treadmill, and weights. And I've been doing it for almost 2.5 years now, and almost every day. I love it. So yeah, I'm not that consistent in general, but for the Civil War and Orange Theory, I'm pretty consistent.
Do you do like Civil War reenactments, like dress up on?
No, that's what I wanted to be when I was little. I wanted to be a Civil War reenactor.
Oh, wow. I think about like from, what's the movie? Sweet Home Alabama. Like the dad does these Civil War reenactments on weekends.
So I wanted to be a drummer boy because one of my favorite movies growing up was Gettysburg with Martin Sheen as Robert E. Lee. And we would go rent it at Marsh Supermarkets where it was the 2 VHS set. And I've seen that movie 30 plus times.
Do you still have it on VHS or you're into streaming?
No, I was just asked that recently. No, I don't. But it's the one movie where I want my kids to watch it eventually and they're going to hate it. But so between the ages of like 8 and 11, I wanted to be a drummer boy. And I actually started collecting like belts and hats and a jacket to wear. And then I grew out of it. But I still love it. I still read constantly about it. I love that time period in the country.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's probably the one part of history I remember paying really close attention to, like history class. I just loved all that stuff with just all of it. Both
the geopolitics that were happening at the time and the structure of the country and the election of Lincoln. I mean, it's just all that stuff is fascinating. And then I'll dabble in World War II, but I think that's just me being 40 and a dad. I feel like that's what I have to do. It's just like World War II.
I feel like every book I read these days is like every historical fiction is something about World War II.
Yeah. I think so. I think it's pretty popular at the moment.
Very cool. Well, good. Yeah, especially popular given the Civil War our country's in right now.
Yes.
So it's very relevant from that perspective. Well, cool. All right. If people enjoy hearing about you and learning about you, what's the best way to follow you or connect with you if they're interested?
I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's the place to be. I'm also on Twitter, but that's a little bit more infrequently and more personal. But LinkedIn is where I spend a lot of time.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I hope you enjoyed it. We did. All right.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I loved it. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. See you later.